Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Please confirm if you can hear me and I start. Okay. So, since you're not participating, I was asking a simple question about administrative authorities, and I asked a simple question. In your knowledge of people who are called public officers, who is the highest ranking public authority or officer that you know? Who is the highest ranking public officer that you know? Or do you know to whom administrative law applies? Who does administrative law apply to, and who is the highest ranking person? I don't understand the silence. Is it that I should continue? Is it that you don't know? Because you can say that we don't know or something. Who is the highest ranking officer? Let's have a quick class. Yeah.
It's the president.
Yeah. But why do you think the president is a high? What makes the president an administrative officer? What roles does he have that make him an administrative officer? So let me just, because of time, I'm just going to go through this. I normally prefer when we participate as a class, but because of time, let me just go through it. So the highest person we have, who is an administrator, is the president. The president, ideally, is supposed to be an administrative officer. He's the head of state, he's the head of government, he's the commander-in-chief of the UPDF forces. So under the Constitution, if you want to go so legal, under Article 98 of the Constitution, the president is established as an administrative officer, and there are some things which don't apply to administrative law, but most of them make him an administrative officer. For example, when he's appointing cabinet ministers, he is supposed to act as an administrative officer. The other principles we talked about, rule of law, natural justice, separation of powers, and all those things, they apply to him. He can appoint any ministers, he can appoint permanent secretaries, he can appoint ambassadors and commissioners, he can appoint the Auditor General, IGG, Inspector General of Police, judges of the High Court, Director of Public Prosecutions. All these people, he can appoint them. However, while he's performing these functions, he does them as an administrative officer. He doesn't just do them out of the blue. He is supposed to comply with certain requirements. For example, qualifications. Even if the president wants to put his brother or sister or cousin or muzukulu as the judge, at least that person must still have the qualifications of becoming a judge. You must have been a lawyer, you must have practiced for 10 years. You get it? So if the president does something and tries to appoint someone who is not, he will be told that this person cannot be a judge or cannot be the IGG. So that's how the aspect of administrative that applies to him. I'll give an example quickly, just for your understanding. There's a case. There's someone who was called Benjamin Odochi. He was a good judge. Had been there for a long time, but he was old. He was 75 years old. I mean, the president wanted him to be a Chief Justice of Uganda. So when he nominated him and appointed him, he was advised that no, you cannot. Even if this person has been appointed, the person had to leave the office because he was above his age. So in that case, he still had to act as an administrator. In terms of emergency, in terms of state of war, the president has to consult with the cabinet before determining war, that there's a state of war. He doesn't just wake up and say there is a war. Even so, when it came to lockdown during COVID, he had to consult with his ministers and his advisors what to do, and they would advise him that in the circumstances this. So when he comes to office, he says, I've been told this, I've been told that, I've been told that, the law says this. Then he would say the famous thing, therefore I'm deciding this. You should have seen that during COVID. So he has the power to declare war, to declare a state of emergency, but he does it upon guidance from other people. In terms of international treaties, signing international documents and agreements, he's the president, yes, but he still does this in accordance with administrative law. He has to be advised what to follow. You know, you don't just sign any agreement. You still have to be advised, even if you're seeing the new laws which he passes, even including the anti-homosexual bill and all those laws. He's still advised by Parliament. The process has to go through. You have to sit as Parliament, pass the law, review the law, then you pass it again 3 times, then finally you take it to the president to sign. The president just can't get a document, write it in his house and sign. And also there's what they call prerogative of mercy. I don't know if you've heard of it, but the president has the ability to forgive certain criminals for crimes. But he doesn't just wake up in the morning and say, I've forgiven so and so, I've forgiven so and so. There's a whole committee that sits, recommends people to him, and then he can exercise his duty. So that just shows you that administrative law applies to the president. He's a public officer. 2, after the president, you now have the ministers. They can be ministers or ministers of state. These people are not, their functions are not so clear under the constitution, but they're supposed to do their functions in relation to the policies of government. So they're supposed to sign statutory instruments on behalf of the president. They're supposed to sign certain administrative functions, you know, like appointing certain public officers, regulations, passing small laws, and things like that. If you had taken time to look at the laws I gave you to look at, you'd see that most laws have a provision saying that the minister shall pass rules and regulations concerning this. So, for example, they might pass the Children's Act, but then they'll say the Minister of Labour has the power to make rules and regulations about how children should be adopted, how children should be maintained, and things like that. So ministers have those rules, but when they are exercising those powers, they act as public authorities and they enforce administrative law. You'll see this is mainly because they're given wide powers to do certain things, so they have to act as administrators. The minister won't just wake up and say, I've decided today, I'm the prime minister, I've decided to do this. There has to be a proper process, and administrative law applies to them. After the ministers, you now have permanent secretaries. These people are created by Article 174 of the Constitution. This is the administrative head of a government department or ministry. So if you find that Ministry of Justice or Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Agriculture, there's always someone they call a permanent secretary. This one does all the administrative work of the institution, like planning for expenditure, accountability for public funds, giving advice to the minister, and all this. But everything that PS does, permanent secretary does, is supposed to be governed by those principles of administrative law. So they are administrative officers. Yeah. So after that, we now come to understand who are public officers. These people, who any other person who is appointed under Article 175 of the Constitution. You can look at it in your free time. We have what you call a public officer. This is any person holding or acting in any office of the public service. As long as you're in a public service, you're an officer holding any position in a public service, then you'll be referred to as a public officer. And you know what public service is? Public service is any service in any civil capacity of the government where you're paid salary, which is coming straight from the consolidated fund, the main treasury. You become a public officer. These people are supposed to be public officers. They're supposed to apply administrative law in whatever they do. You're supposed to, there are what they call standing orders and regulations. You must have heard of them, but there are rules which govern how they work. You must be appointed properly in writing, either on contract or whatever it is. But the moment you're appointed, then you become a public officer, and then you have to conduct yourself like a proper administrator because you have authority to make decisions. Yeah, you could be appointed as a transport officer in some organization, but under the public service. So the decisions you make as a transport officer have to be governed by administrative law. Yeah. So you look at, I was just giving different examples, but you'll see what they normally do as public officers: enforcement of government policies in line with administrative law. So if they give you a policy, that you have a policy of ensuring that people wear masks, and you're in the Ministry of Health, and you're the health officer of Rukungiri district, you still have to give out the masks according to administrative law. You have to, if you are hiring or firing someone, or you're recommending something, all this has to be governed by administrative law. Yeah. So after public officers, you have different people who are members of commissions. These are, you've heard of commissions, things like the Land Commission, Public Service Commission, and in your case, Education Service Commission, Human Rights Commission. All these commissions, people appointed to those commissions are public officers, and they're supposed to operate using administrative law. Administrative law applies to them. These are bodies established under the government, and their members are appointed normally by the president with approval of parliament. All these people are supposed to be public officers. So you can consider situations like where there is land. Remember, there are wrangles for land in certain areas, and the president appointed Honorable Nantaba to head a commission. There's a time they appointed Justice Bamugemerere, and all these people, they are appointed as commissioners, but they work as administrators, and they're supposed to follow the rules. They don't just work out of the what? Of the blue. Remember the principles we talked about for which govern administrative officers and how they do. What happens is, when they're doing all these things, they have the discretion to work, but that discretion should be the network is terrible, you people. Is the network terrible even now? Can you hear me at least? Okay. Should I type out what I'm saying? I don't know if you're hearing. Okay. So that is for the minister. Then other people to whom administrative law applies are what we call constitutional offices. Constitutional offices are those offices that are established under the Constitution, where if you read the Constitution, you get time and just go through the Constitution, you'll see there are offices like Auditor General, the Clerk to Parliament, Chief Justice, Inspector General of Police, IGG, Inspector General of Government, Commissioner of Prisons, Director of Public Prosecutions, Attorney General, Solicitor General. All these offices, they are established under the Constitution. Anyone who is appointed to that area is supposed to be an administrator and should apply administrative law in how they conduct themselves. The next one, there are certain corporations which are established under the government to carry out activities or businesses on behalf of government. These are they are called public corporations, and they're statutory bodies. They are established by an act of parliament. Also, these ones, administrative law applies to them. So you'll find corporations like Uganda Revenue Authority, Uganda Investment Authority, Coffee Marketing Board, what else? You can think of any of these authorities. Uganda Wildlife Authority, which others? But all these corporations that are set up, they are public corporations, and administrative law applies to them, because anyone in those offices is supposed to apply the rule of law, fairness, justice, and all those things. And they are supposed to help. They're supposed to ensure that they implement administrative law in how they conduct themselves. You know these corporations, I don't need to go into so much of their duties, but when they're making decisions, they have to care, because if they don't, they can be challenged, as we shall discuss later on. Yeah. So, for example, if you go to Uganda Wildlife Authority and you want a permit to hunt gorillas or to hunt lions in the game park, if they are making the decision to give you the permit or not, they have to follow the law, not just say no, or also not just give you the position without any considerations. There has to be a process. If you want to get a permit to cut down trees from Forest Authority, you apply for a license. That authority has to apply the law before they give you that permit. They don't just make it out of the blue. They don't just say no or yes. If you go to NEMA and you want to use a wetland and you apply for a license to use that wetland, that NEMA is supposed to follow the right process so that there is fairness, equality, and all that. You don't give a license to operate a wetland to a Chinese person and then you refuse to give it to a Ugandan person without any justification. There has to be a proper justification for it, and that is why administrative law applies to them. The next administrative authority or body that you can consider are what they call tribunals, administrative tribunals. These are they work like courts, but they are semi courts, let's say. For them, they are set up to administer justice or administration at a small level. So the tribunals help government to make decisions in terms of certain policies and things like that, resolve disputes and all those things. But when they are doing this, they're supposed to follow administrative law. To understand what administrative tribunals are, they operate like courts, but they are not courts. And I'll give you an example. They are established also by law. So, for example, under the Land Act, you can Google it and see, you have the Land Tribunal. Under for example, so if you want to get a land title for your land in the village, there's a Land Tribunal which you're supposed to apply to. They come, they sit, and they make a decision of whether to give you the title or not. And they're supposed to follow the right process. If they just refuse to give you a title, then that is a problem. Under the Communications Act, you have the Communication Tribunal. If they want to ban a certain radio station for playing a song or what? Lockdown, Tulimu lockdown, that song. You don't just wake up and say we've banned the song. It's a whole tribunal. You're supposed to come, sit, make a decision, and then communicate the decision to the person affected, and they can decide, they can understand why you made the decision. Yeah, you don't worry about typing because I'm recording anyway. I have to upload these things immediately after. Under the Labor Disputes Act and the Employment Act, you have the Industrial Court, which is also a tribunal to handle labor disputes. Under the Income Tax Act, I'm just giving examples. All acts have tribunals, may have tribunals that are set up. You have what they call the Tax Appeals Tribunal. So if you import your items from Dubai, and then they come and they tell you to pay tax of 1 million shillings without any justification, you can appeal to the Tax Appeal Tribunal, and it will decide whether or not to reduce, whether it was fair or not. So that's what tribunals are. So they all apply administrative law in how they conduct themselves. After tribunals, you now have, of course, courts. You have the courts where you have judges, justices, and all those people who are appointed by the president. They also apply as administrators. That is their main role. All these people, all public officers are supposed to apply the principles of administrative law, the ones which we discussed in the previous class, and that is what they're supposed to do. So I'm hoping that by this you can now know who to complain about as an administrator, and where to go in case they've done something wrong. You know what remedy to follow, because the remedy is supposed to be in administrative law. The difference is this: if you apply for a loan from the bank, from Stanbic Bank, and the manager refuses to give you a loan because you came in when you're wearing jeans, that is not an administrative law issue. You will have to take on the bank loan. However, if you went to apply for a job in KCCA or Kira Town Council, and they refuse to give you the job because you're not a Muganda, or they say you have few children, you have 2 children, or they say something, maybe you're light skinned, and they don't give you the job, those considerations are not proper, so you'll challenge that in the with an administrative court of law, or a court which is handling administrative law. And that is the purpose. You know the difference between an administrator and a person who is not an administrator, to whom administrative law applies. And that was the purpose of this class. Is there an officer I've left out? Let me just check. Is there an officer I've left out? Yeah, okay, then the police. Maybe I left out the police. Police officers are also public officers, and administrative law applies to them. So whatever they do, they decide, and how they do it is supposed to be checked by administrative law. They act as administrators. Yeah. So those are the public administrative authorities to whom administrative law applies. And now the question is, can you, right now, I'm hoping that right now you can easily know who administrative law applies to and to whom it doesn't apply to. Am I right to assume that? What? Can you imagine I've been teaching all this time? I've been teaching for the past 22 minutes. Okay, that's a problem. What is the real problem? I've gone through all the administrative officers. Let me just compress the video and upload it. I've gone through the public officers. Yeah. So what I've done, I've discussed administrative officers from the president to the police. Let me just upload the video which I've recorded on the phone, please, and then you can view it. Either I'll put it on YouTube or on the Vclass. Yeah, I didn't know the network had gone off. Yeah. So what I'm advising is, maybe let's go see that video. It's 20 minutes, about 20 minutes long, and then you get an idea of who an administrative officer is, and then we can see how to move on to the next part, which is delegation of powers, discretion and delegation of powers. Is that okay, or should I type?